I always knew my family saw me as an afterthought. Ever since I was a kid, it was clear Alyssa was the star, and I was just there. She was the perfect child, straight A's, head of every club, the one my parents bragged about to neighbors. Meanwhile, I was the one they forgot at school, the one whose achievements were met with half-hearted. That's nice, Emily. The only person who truly saw me was Grandpa George. He lived in a small cabin by the lake, and every weekend, I'd escape to his place. We'd fish, play chess, and watch old movies on his ancient TV. Unlike my parents, he actually listened to my frustrations, my dreams, my thoughts. He made me feel like I mattered. Then, in my sophomore year of college, he passed away. I was devastated. But at the reading of his will, I finally felt a spark of something I'd never felt before. Validation. Alyssa got $300,000, enough to fund the dream restaurant she and her fiancé, Mark, had been planning for years. My parents were thrilled for her. But when the lawyer read what Grandpa had left me, I froze. The lake house. It was mine. Every memory, every moment spent with him, it wasn't just gone. He made sure I had something. Alyssa, of course, laughed. "Oh my God, Emily got the old shack?" She snickered, barely containing her amusement. "Well, at least you have somewhere to live when you fail out of college." My mother shot her a half-hearted glare, but it was obvious she didn't disagree. I held my breath, waiting for my father to step in, to say something in my defense, to finally, after 20 years, act like he was proud of me. He just nodded and said, "That seems fair." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Of course it was fair to them. I wasn't Alyssa. I never would be. But I had Grandpa's house. That was enough. At least, I thought it was. 2 weeks later, over a family dinner, my mother set her fork down and gave me the look. "Sweetheart, we were thinking," she started, already in negotiation mode. Alyssa and Mark exchanged glances, smirking. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "You're in college most of the year," she continued, "and it doesn't make sense to let that house just sit empty." I stiffened. "What are you saying?" Alyssa swirled her wine, barely hiding her grin. "Well," Mom went on, "Alyssa and Mark need a place to stay while they get the restaurant going. Wouldn't it be wonderful for them to live in the lake house? In the meantime," I nearly choked. "You want me to give them my house?" Mom smiled as if she'd just suggested something completely reasonable. "It makes the most sense." I turned to Dad, hoping for backup. He didn't even look at me. "Family helps family, Em," he muttered. Alyssa feigned sympathy. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You'll be at school most of the time. It's not like you need it right now." Mark grinned. "And we'd totally take care of it for you." I wanted to scream, to tell them no, to remind them that they had $300,000 to find their own damn place. But I knew exactly how that would go. Mom would sigh. Dad would shake his head. Alyssa would mock me until I gave in. I clenched my fists under the table. "Fine," Alyssa beamed. And just like that, my inheritance became their free vacation home. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the campus cafe, trying to distract myself from my anger. Then, a few months later, Alyssa made a grand announcement. "We're going to Hawaii for Christmas," she declared over dinner. "And you have to come, Em." I blinked. "Wait, really?" She grinned. "Of course. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. We'll be staying at this amazing resort right on the beach." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being included. Mom smiled. "We want the whole family together." Dad nodded. "It wouldn't be the same without you." I hesitated. A trip like that had to be expensive. Alyssa seemed to read my mind. "It's only $3,000, she said casually, sipping her wine. "Totally worth it for an experience like this. $3,000. It was everything I had saved from working double shifts." I hesitated, but then I saw Mom's expectant face, Dad's encouraging nod. For once, they wanted me to be part of something. I smiled. "I'll do it." Alyssa clapped her hands. "Great. Send me the money, and I'll book everything." The second I got home, I transferred every last penny. A week before the trip, my phone rang. It was Alyssa. "Hey, Em," she said, sounding fake, too cheerful. I frowned. "What's up?" She sighed dramatically. "So, bad news. The restaurant's been struggling, and Mark and I had to make some tough decisions." A pit formed in my stomach. "What decisions?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Well, we had to cut some expenses." I gripped my phone tighter. What expenses? Her voice was dripping with fake sympathy. We all talked about it, and it just makes the most sense if you sit this one out. My heart stopped. What? You understand, right? She continued, as if she wasn't gutting me. Mark and I never even had a proper honeymoon. We need this. I could barely breathe. I already paid. Oh, don't be upset, she chirped. Your money helped cover the difference. We couldn't cancel on everyone. That would have been so awkward. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. You used my money? I whispered. Alyssa scoffed. Relax. It's not that big of a deal. I felt like I was going to throw up. My own family, the people who promised me I was included, had stolen my savings to fund their trip. Mom's voice came from the background. Tell her someone has to watch the house while we're gone. Alyssa laughed. Oh, and hey, you can look after the lake house for us. You're the responsible one after all. She hung up. I stared at my phone, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. For years, I had let them walk all over me. But not anymore. Not this time. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and made a decision. By the time they got back from Hawaii, everything would be different. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. They stole my money, every last penny. They laughed about it. They expected me to stay home like a loyal little doormat and watch my own house while they sipped cocktails in Hawaii on my dime. I sat there for a long time, numb. Then something inside me snapped. I wasn't the forgotten kid anymore. I wasn't letting this slide. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the lake house. Walking in, I felt a fresh wave of rage. Alyssa and Mark had completely taken over. My grandfather's cozy cabin, unrecognizable. The old fishing photos were gone, replaced with framed newspaper clippings about their restaurant. His leather recliner, thrown out in favor of a sleek, overpriced sofa. The warmth, the memories wiped away like they meant nothing. I went straight to the office. My grandfather's desk was still there, buried under their junk. I shoved their paperwork aside and pulled open the bottom drawer, digging until I found what I was looking for: the deed. My name, my house. No loopholes. They had no right to be here, and they sure as hell weren't staying a second longer. I made a call. Hey, is this Lakeside Movers? Yeah, I need an emergency eviction move, Christmas Eve. Yes, I'll pay extra. After confirming the movers, I had one more stop, the locksmith. Change everything, I told him when he arrived, pointing at the doors, front, back, windows. If there's a way in, replace it. He raised an eyebrow. Trouble tenants? I smiled. Something like that. The next morning, I woke up to the first barrage of texts. Alyssa, WTF, Emily, where is our stuff? Mark, did you seriously kick US out? This is insane. Mom, call me right now, young lady. I set my phone aside and made myself a cup of coffee. I had all the time in the world. Then, the calls started. I ignored them. 10 minutes later, a final text came through. Dad, we're coming over. I smiled to myself. Perfect. An hour later, I heard the familiar sound of my dad's truck pulling into the driveway. Showtime. I stayed in the living room sipping my coffee as the front doorknob rattled. Then bang, bang, bang. Emily, open this door right now. I took my time. Let them sweat. Another round of frantic banging. Then, through the window, I saw Alyssa jabbing angrily at the keypad. Too bad for her, I'd changed the code. Finally, I stood and opened the door. Alyssa stormed in first, Mark and my parents right behind her. What the hell did you do? She screeched. I sipped my coffee. Oh, you mean my house? Mark's face was red. You had no right to do this. I laughed. Actually laughed. No right? You mean like how you had no right to spend my money on your vacation? Mom cut in, arms crossed. This is completely unacceptable, Emily. Where is their stuff? I gestured vaguely. Oh, somewhere between here and your house. Should be arriving soon. Merry Christmas. Alyssa looked like she was about to explode. You're jealous. That's what this is. You couldn't handle the fact that we got to go to Hawaii and you didn't. I set my mug down. No, Alyssa, this isn't about jealousy. It's about respect. Something none of you have ever given me. Dad finally spoke up. Sweetheart, you went too far. I cut him off. Too far? Too far? I took a step forward, voice shaking but not from fear. From years of being treated like nothing. You stole my money. You let them live in my house rent-free while I worked double shifts just to survive. You treated me like I didn't matter. Alyssa scoffed. Oh, get over it. That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. I took a deep breath and looked straight at my parents. Alyssa and Mark are your problem now, not mine. Mom's face fell. Emily, don't do this. I shrugged. Already done. Alyssa clenched her fists. You're gonna regret this. I smiled. No, I really won't. And with that, I closed the door in their faces. That was a year ago. Alyssa and Mark's restaurant closed down. Turns out, blowing money on vacations instead of running a business isn't a great strategy. They're still living with my parents, mooching off them like they mooched off me. Meanwhile, I turned the lake house into a short-term rental. It pays for itself now and then some. Do I miss them? No. For the first time in my life, I finally put myself first, and I don't regret a damn thing. After slamming the door in their faces, I expected an explosion. I braced myself for another storm of calls, texts, maybe even threats. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of them anymore. I was free. Alyssa and Mark were gone. For good. The silence that followed was almost unsettling. No more waiting for the next insult. No more passive-aggressive digs about how I wasn't measuring up. Just peace. But then came the real question, what now? For days, I wandered the lake house, taking in every inch of it. Without Alyssa's overpriced decorations cluttering the space, it finally felt like home again. I found Grandpa's old chair in the garage, tossed carelessly under a pile of junk. My blood boiled just thinking about how easily they'd thrown away things that actually mattered. I dragged it back inside, placed it by the fireplace where it belonged, and sat down. The leather was worn, the seat a little stiff, but I felt like a kid again sitting beside Grandpa, listening to him tell stories while the fire crackled. He'd always told me, the best things in life take work, kid, but the good ones, they're worth it. I smiled to myself. He was right. This house was mine, but I needed to make it work for me. Living in the house full-time wasn't an option. I still had school, and with Alyssa and Mark draining my parents dry, I knew they'd come crawling back for money eventually. I needed financial security. So I made a plan. I spent weeks fixing the place up, cleaning, repainting, replacing what Alyssa had ruined. I even found an old box of Grandpa's fishing gear and set it up in the guest room, turning it into a rustic-themed space. Once the house was ready, I listed it as a short-term rental. Lakeside retreats were popular, and Grandpa's place had the perfect setup, cozy, private, and right on the water. I wasn't sure what to expect, but within 2 days I had my first booking, then another, then another. By spring, the house was fully booked for months, and just like that, my inheritance wasn't just a sentimental place, it was my ticket to independence. Word traveled fast. It didn't take long before my parents found out that I was making money off the lake house. Mom called first. Emily, sweetie, we need to talk. I knew that tone, the concerned parent act, the guilt trip. What is it, Mom? I said flatly. She sighed dramatically. You know, things have been hard lately. Alyssa and Mark have had some setbacks, and we were thinking, maybe you could help out. There it was, the ask. I leaned back in Grandpa's chair, barely containing my laugh. Help out? You mean give them money? Mom hesitated. Well, not exactly, but you're doing so well now. And, Alyssa, I cut her off. You mean the same Alyssa who stole my money, who laughed in my face? That Alyssa? Silence. Emily, she tried again. She's your sister. I smirked. And this is my money. Another long pause. Dad and I are just asking you to be reasonable. I shook my head. No, you're asking me to bail her out. Again, not happening. Mom's voice turned sharp. This isn't how family treats each other. I exhaled slowly, my patience gone. You're right. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't use each other. Family doesn't treat one kid like a doormat while worshiping the other. So, tell me, when has Alyssa ever treated me like family? She had no answer for that. So I ended the call. The text started a week later. Alyssa, wow, you're really gonna do this? Alyssa, you know we're struggling. You don't even need the money that bad. Alyssa, Mom and Dad are so disappointed in you. I didn't reply. Then came the last one. Cutting them off wasn't easy. For years, I had been conditioned to put them first, to seek their approval. Even though I hated how they treated me, some part of me had still wanted their love. But the longer I stayed away, the lighter I felt. Without their negativity weighing me down, I started focusing on things that actually made me happy. I started painting again. I reconnected with old friends. I went on road trips just because I could. And the best part? I never had to check my bank account in fear again. The lake house covered everything: my tuition, my rent, even little luxuries I never used to let myself have. I wasn't rich, but for the first time, I was in control of my own life. And that was priceless. Alyssa and Mark's restaurant? Gone. They ran it straight into the ground. They're still living with my parents, still making excuses, still blaming everyone but themselves. I haven't spoken to them in a year. Mom tried again last month, leaving a voicemail about how the family isn't the same without you. I never called back, because the truth is, I don't miss them. I don't miss the insults, the guilt trips, the constant feeling that I'd never be enough. I don't need them. I have peace, I have freedom, I have self-respect, and I'll never let anyone take that from me again. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. No more guilt trips, no more being the family's doormat. Just me, my future, and a growing bank account from the lake house rental. It felt like I had finally won. But life has a funny way of testing you the moment you start getting comfortable. It started with a letter. A formal-looking envelope arrived at my apartment one afternoon. I wasn't expecting anything, but the sender's name made my stomach drop. Alyssa Reynolds. I tore it open, scanning the document inside. My hands clenched. She was suing me for wrongful eviction and emotional damages. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Unbelievable. The letter claimed that, since Alyssa had established residency at the lake house, I had no legal right to kick her out. She wanted compensation for the trauma I caused her by forcing her out onto the streets. Oh, and the amount she was demanding? $50,000. I actually had to sit down. This couldn't be real. I flipped to the last page and saw the signature at the bottom. It was real. My sister was actually suing me. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. Instead, I felt rage. After everything, stealing my money, living in my house rent-free, laughing in my face, now she wanted to take even more from me. Not happening. I grabbed my phone and called a lawyer. I wasn't sure if I needed one yet, but I wasn't taking any chances. The moment I explained the situation, he laughed. "Oh, this is nonsense. She doesn't have a case." I exhaled, relieved. "You're sure?" "Positive. First of all, the house is in your name. There was no lease agreement, no rental contract, just a family arrangement. She has nothing. And even if she did try to claim residency, she wasn't paying rent. That alone disqualifies her." I felt a wave of relief, but the anger was still there. "She seriously thinks she can get away with this?" I muttered. "She probably thinks you'll just settle." "That's what people like her do," he said. "They count on you being scared." I clenched my jaw. "Then let's make it clear. I'm not scared. Alyssa, you're nothing without this family. You'll come crawling back. Just wait." I stared at my screen, shaking my head. They still thought I needed them. They had no idea I had never felt stronger. My lawyer filed a response the next day. Not only did we fight the claim, but we added a counterclaim charging Alyssa for the unpaid months of occupancy. If she wanted to claim she was a tenant, fine. Then she owed me back rent. My lawyer smiled. We'll see how serious she really is. Sure enough, a week later I got a text. "Alyssa, WTF, Emily? You're charging me? Alyssa, you're taking this too far. I just wanted what's fair. Alyssa, you don't have to do this. Just drop your claim and I'll drop mine." I stared at the screen, shaking my head. She really thought she could negotiate with me? I typed back. "Me, no deal. See you in court." The court date was set, but I knew Alyssa. She didn't actually want to go through with this. She just wanted to scare me into handing her money. So I wasn't surprised when, 2 days before the hearing, Mom called. I sighed and answered. "Mom, I'm not dropping it." She was silent for a moment. "Emily, Alyssa is devastated. This is tearing the family apart." I scoffed. "The family was already broken, Mom. You just ignored it." "You don't understand," she pleaded. "She's under so much stress. The restaurant failed. They lost their apartment. I cut her off." "And whose fault is that?" "Not mine," Mom exhaled sharply. "She's your sister." "She's a leech," I corrected. "And if she wants to play legal games, she'd better be ready to lose." Mom's voice cracked. "She's scared, Emily. For the first time, I heard real desperation. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered everything she'd done. I wasn't backing down. The night before the hearing, I got one last message from Alyssa. Alyssa, fine. You win. I'm dropping everything. No apology. No admission of guilt. Just a coward's retreat. But that was all I needed. The next morning, my lawyer confirmed that she had formally withdrawn the lawsuit. It was over. She lost. A week later, I got one last call from Mom. We should talk, she said carefully. I already knew what this was about. Alyssa, I sighed. What do you want, Mom? She hesitated. Maybe it's time to let go of the anger. I closed my eyes. That's funny, because the second I cut you all off, I stopped feeling angry. Mom was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she whispered, I just want our family back. I swallowed hard. I thought about all the years I had begged for them to see me, to treat me like I mattered. And now, finally, when I had nothing left to give, Mom suddenly wanted to fix things. But the truth was, there was nothing left to fix. So I took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I'd be able to say. There is no family, Mom. Not anymore. And then I hung up. For the last time, that was the day I chose myself. Not them. Not their approval. Not their toxic idea of family. Me. And you know what? It felt damn good. For the first time in my life, I had no ties to my family. No texts. No guilt trips. No sudden calls demanding money. Just silence. And it was glorious. I expected to feel sad. Maybe even regretful. But as the days passed, all I felt was relief. I could finally breathe without waiting for the next insult, the next demand, the next moment where I'd be reminded that I was never their priority. Alyssa was gone. My parents were gone. And I had never felt more at peace. With the lawsuit behind me, I could focus on what actually mattered, building my life. The lake house rental was doing better than ever. I upgraded the furniture, added small touches to make it feel more like home things. Alyssa never cared about. Grandpa's chair stayed in its rightful place by the fireplace, and every time I sat in it, I felt like he was still with me. Money wasn't an issue anymore. The passive income covered everything, and for the first time, I wasn't constantly stressing over bills. I finally had freedom, so I started doing things for me. I took a weekend trip just because I could. I went out with friends without worrying about saving every dollar. I even signed up for an art class, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time or money for. And little by little, I started to feel happy. I hadn't heard much about Alyssa since she dropped the lawsuit, but word had a way of traveling. Apparently, after the restaurant failed, she and Mark burned through their savings. The Hawaii trip, their expensive tastes, the bad business decisions, it all caught up to them. They had nothing left. So, of course, they stayed at my parents' house, living rent-free like they had with me. But the difference? Mom and Dad weren't me. They tried to act like it was fine at first, but it didn't take long before the tension set in. Alyssa wasn't the golden child anymore. She was a financial burden. And my parents? They weren't as patient as I had been. It started with small fights. Then, Mom started complaining to relatives. Then, Dad lost his temper. And finally, a few months later, Alyssa and Mark were kicked out. When I heard the news, I didn't feel bad, because they did it to themselves. One night, as I was relaxing on my couch, my phone lit up. Alyssa, hey. I stared at the screen, shocked. I hadn't heard from her in months. My gut told me to ignore it. But curiosity got the best of me. Me, what do you want? Her response came fast. Alyssa, can we talk? I hesitated. If this had been a year ago, I would have jumped at the chance to fix things. But now, I wasn't sure if I even cared. Still, a part of me wanted to hear her out. So I texted back, me, why? The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Then came her reply. Alyssa, I don't have anywhere to go. I exhaled, shaking my head. There it was, not an apology, not a sign that she had changed. Just another attempt to use me. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the lake house to check on things. As I sat on the porch looking out at the water, I thought about everything. How I used to chase their approval. How I spent years hoping they would see me. How much time I wasted waiting for love that was never coming. And I realized something. I didn't need it. I didn't need them. For the first time, I truly, completely let go. I blocked Alyssa's number. Then I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and smiled. Because I had finally won. I thought it was over. Blocking Alyssa's number felt like closing the last door to my past. No more drama. No more guilt. Just me, my future, and a life I had finally built on my own terms. But life has a way of throwing one last test when you least expect it. A few weeks after ignoring Alyssa's message, I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was another scam, maybe some last-ditch attempt from Alyssa or my parents to squeeze money out of me. But when I saw the sender, my stomach dropped. It was from Grandpa's lawyer. I ripped it open, my hands shaking. Inside was a simple letter. Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm long gone. But before I left, I made one last decision, and I hope it helps you. I always knew you were stronger than they gave you credit for. This is my final gift to you. I love you, kid. Never forget that. Grandpa George attached to it was a second document, a property deed. I blinked, rereading it twice. Then my heart stopped, because it wasn't for the lake house. It was for my parents' house. I sat there, stunned. Grandpa had owned my parents' house this entire time. I had no idea. No one did. And now, it belonged to me. A million thoughts ran through my mind. Questions, confusion. But underneath it all, one realization hit me like a freight train. I owned the house Alyssa and my parents were living in. I could have done anything. I could have kicked them out immediately, just like they had tried to do to me. I could have sold the house from under them. I could have made them pay every penny they owed. And honestly, I thought about it. But then I realized I didn't care anymore. I wasn't that girl begging for their approval. I wasn't their punching bag. I wasn't the forgotten daughter desperate to be seen. I was free. So I did the one thing they would never expect. I sold the house, and I gave them nothing. The day the sale closed, I sent one last message to my mother. Me, the house has been sold. You have 30 days to move out. After that, it's no longer my problem. She called immediately, but I didn't answer. Then the text started. Mom, Emily, this is insane. Where will we go? Dad, we need to talk about this. Be reasonable. Alyssa, you cannot do this. Alyssa, you're a monster. Alyssa, I hope you rot. I read each message without feeling a thing. Then I blocked them. That was the last time I heard from them. I used the money from the sale to invest, not just in my future, but in everything I had once been too scared to dream of. I traveled. I started my own business. I met people who actually cared about me, people who saw me for who I was, not as Alyssa's shadow. And I never looked back. Maybe. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like justice. They had spent years making me feel small, like I was nothing, like I would always be second place to Alyssa, forever the backup plan. But in the end, I was the one who walked away with everything. And they were left with nothing. Because in the end, karma didn't need my help. They did this to themselves. And I was finally, truly, and completely free. Story 2. My husband made me a cup of coffee, but it smelled really weird. Made you a special coffee, honey. Oh, he said. I answered. How lovely. And silently switched the cups with my sister-in-law, who always tormented me. 30 minutes later. Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey? James, my husband, asked with a strange smile that stopped short of his eyes. I was sitting at my sister-in-law Nina's elegant dining table in her Nashville home, where we gathered for our monthly family brunch. My stomach turned at the odd, almost metallic smell coming from the coffee cup in front of me. I'm Christina, and I never thought that at the age of 29, I would be wondering if my own husband was attempting to poison me. However, I had learned to exercise caution, particularly around Nina, after 3 years of marriage and numerous unintentional food poisoning episodes. She had a way of orchestrating situations that left me sick or humiliated, always with that same innocent smile James was wearing now. How considerate of you. My mind racing, I forced a smile as I answered. The scent flowing from the cup was unlike any coffee I'd smelled before. It reminded me of the occasion last month when I'd ended up in urgent care after drinking tea at Nina's place. The physicians couldn't explain my problems, and Nina had sworn she'd made the tea precisely the same way she made her own. Nina watched me intently from across the table, absently stirring her own untouched coffee. James has been quite the barista recently, she said with a smirk. For you, he has been experimenting with various brewing techniques. The way she emphasized for you sent chills down my spine. James has been spending more time at Nina's place recently, and I'd seen that they were allegedly preparing a surprise for our next anniversary. However, the whispered conversations seemed strange, and they ceased when I walked in. The strange text I glimpsed on his phone, and now this coffee with its unusual fragrance. I lifted the cup, pretending to take a sip while studying their expressions. James and Nina exchanged a short glance that reinforced my assumptions. Making a show of checking my phone, I stood up abruptly. "Would you take a look at that? For work, I have to make a brief call. Nina, would you mind if I use your study?" As I walked past Nina's place setting, I deliberately stumbled, quickly switching our coffee cups in the confusion of studying myself. "I'm so sorry," I said, standing up straight. "I'm such a klutz." "Occasionally." Nina shrugged aside my apologies with a forced smile. "Just try not to break anything in the study." I nodded and ran away, my heart hammering through the study doorway. I could still see them at the table. All I could do now was wait and observe from the doorway of the study. My stomach knotted with nervousness as I watched Nina raise the coffee cup to her lips. I needed to know the truth, but I also wanted to warn her and stop her. I'd spent too many nights in emergency rooms, too many hours hunched over in pain. After eating with them, of course. This was not always the case. When I first met James at a friend's wedding in Nashville 3 years ago, he was affable and considerate. Nina had seemed welcoming too, inviting me to family gatherings and offering to help plan our wedding. But, looking back, I should have noticed the red flags, the way she would accidentally spill things on my dress at important events, or how my food always seemed to have extra seasoning when she helped cook. It began as a minor incident. I have a rumbling stomach. There was a slight allergic reaction. James always had an excuse. "Ready? Maybe it was something you ate earlier, or you must be coming down with something." However, the pattern was starting to emerge. The worst happened 2 months ago, when I had breakfast at their house and ended up in the hospital. The physicians detected traces of something in my system they couldn't identify. James, however, persuaded everyone that I must have taken some out-of-date medicine. I gripped the doorframe, watching as Nina took another sip of the coffee. James appeared indifferent as he typed on his phone. I left my own unopened copycat on the table, and it phoned. I shuddered as the metallic odor persisted in my nostrils. I saw that Nina's hand was trembling a little. She sat down, the cup, her face instantly pale. "James," she replied, her voice cracking. "There's a problem." James raised his head. His look changed from uncertainty to terror when he recognized which cup she was drinking from. He leaped to his feet, toppling his chair. "Nina, what's happening?" Nina's hands were trembling violently. "I don't now." I believe she tripped and grabbed the table's edge for support as she attempted to stand. "What did you put in that coffee, James?" I strolled out of the study, my phone already filming. James was beside Nina now. He had a pale face. He muttered that wasn't meant to be your cup. However, his statements were audible in the dining room's quiet. Nina's eyes widened with comprehension and horror. "Make an ambulance call," she gasped, dropping to the floor. "Please, I can't." I phoned 911 immediately. My hands steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. Now Nina lay on the ground, her body shaking violently. James knelt alongside her, dread written over his face as he realized their plan had backfired miserably. "Services for emergencies?" "Indeed. We need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive," I said, obviously using my other hand to record on my phone. My sister-in-law looks to be having a strong response to something in her coffee. She's conscious but experiencing tremors as I spoke to the dispatcher. Nina fixed her gaze on mine. Raw fear replaced the usual cold calculation in her eyes. She gasped, "Christina, you switched. You were aware. The ambulance is en route, ma'am." I was reassured by the dispatcher. "Keep on the line, please." James was feeling more anxious by the second. "Nina, what's going on?" That wasn't meant to happen. It was not intended for, after all. "Shut up, James." Nina snapped between clamped teeth, her wrath briefly overpowering her pain. "This is all your fault. You said that she would get so ill that she would be unable to attend the board meeting the following week. You assured me it wouldn't be found." My blood froze. The board meeting where I was set to make my proposal for a significant customer account. For months, Nina had been attempting to get the same account at our rival companies. Everything started coming into place the final month. My voice was surprisingly steady as I spoke. What about the incident at breakfast? It was 2 months ago. Didn't those happen by accident? Another wave of pain twisted Nina's face. The team meant to keep you at home while the Johnson deal was being presented. But you went nonetheless. She doubled over, clutching her stomach. James stated, "We only needed to discredit you," he continued. "Give clients the impression that you are untrustworthy." Outside, the air was filled with sirens. James stood up, backing away from both of us. "Nina, stop talking. You have no idea what you are saying. I am well aware of what I am saying." Nina slurred her words as she spit. "Since Christina began outperforming me at every client meeting, we have been organizing this for months. You were supposed to make sure she drank it today." The paramedics stormed through the front door, and I hurriedly moved aside to allow them work. As they carried Nina onto a stretcher, I stopped recording and transmitted the footage to my private email. Next, to my attorney. James remained paralyzed, watching as his meticulously prepared strategy disintegrated around him. "I'll accompany her to the hospital by car." In a stern voice, I informed the paramedics. "After all, I need to make sure my sister-in-law gets the right treatment." I caught James's scared look, and I'm sure the physicians will be very interested in understanding exactly what was in that coffee. As medical professionals raced to treat Nina, the Nashville General Hospital emergency room was bustling with activity. I sat in the waiting room, my phone clutched in my hand, replaying the recording of Nina's confession. The tremors in her voice, the panic in her eyes, that was all the proof I required. This wasn't simply paranoia on my behalf. Nina Anderson's family. A nurse yelled. I rose up, observing James's apparent absence. He'd murmured something about parking the car 20 minutes ago and hadn't returned. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said, going through the double doors after the nurse. "How is she?" Although she stabilized, the amounts of poisons in her system were alarming. The nurse had a serious look on her face. "Regarding some odd results in her blood tests, the doctor wants to talk to you." A tall, sharp-eyed woman with graying hair, Dr. Phillips, was waiting outside Nina's room. "Could you explain me the specific events leading up to your sister-in-law's illness, Miss S. Bennett?" I pulled out my phone and inhaled deeply. "You should listen to this first, in my opinion." As I listened to the brunch recording, I saw the doctor's face shift from one of professional concern to one of alarm. "This is really serious," she added, scribbling notes on her tablet. "The material we discovered isn't something that ends up in coffee by mistake. We are examining intentional contamination." At that moment, James emerged from the other end of the corridor. His face was sweaty and pale. He had obviously heard what the doctor had said. "Christina." He started taking a step toward me. "Let me clarify. Stay back." Dr. Phillips pressed the call button for the nurse and issued a warning. "Please send security to room 412. James put up his hands in a gesture of submission. "All of this is miscommunication." Nina was perplexed. She was unsure of her own words. "Really? Last week I found a text on his phone and opened it up. The ones I'd sent to myself in secret. Therefore, the texts you sent with Nina regarding ensuring she was out of commission prior to the Henderson presentation were merely cordial exchanges." His face drained of color. "You searched through my phone when I found the weird tablets in your desk drawer." "Yes, I did." I looked across at Dr. Phillips. "Doctor, I've had inexplicable symptoms that have sent me to the hospital 3 times in the last 6 months. If they correspond with what you discovered in Nina's system today, please let me know." The physician's eyes squinted. "To compare, we'll need to conduct some tests. Your husband will be kept accessible for interrogation by security." 2 security officers showed in and took up positions on either side of James. He seemed imprisoned, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Nina and I," he stuttered, "all we wanted to do was slow you down. You were accepting all the major customers while working too hard. Nina said if we could just make you take some time off by poisoning me." My hands trembled with anger, but I spoke steadily. "How long have you been doing this? Was it you who tampered with my food at the Christmas party too?" I only needed James's silence as an answer. I could see Nina's room behind him, where she was lying with several monitors attached to her. The terror of someone who realized their plans had finally caught up with them, had replaced her former swagger. "Detective Mendoza will arrive shortly," Dr. Phillips said softly. "She'll want to obtain statements from everyone involved." I nodded, experiencing an odd sense of serenity. There was no turning back now that the truth was finally being revealed. Within an hour, Detective Mendoza was there, commanding attention in the hospital's sterile hallway. She was an experienced investigator with a focus on instances involving domestic violence, and she listened intently as I played the recording from brunch and showed her the text messages. "Miss S. Bennett," she said, reviewing her notes, "you mentioned past hospitalizations. Could you elaborate on those incidents?" I took out my phone once again and opened a document that I had been secretly keeping up with for months. The first time was following supper at Nina's place in February. I had severe stomach pains and dizziness. The second was the tea incident in April. And then in June, after breakfast with them, my voice stayed steady as I proceeded. The symptoms were identical each time, but sufficiently varied to prevent the physicians from determining a reason. As she studied my thorough log of dates, symptoms, and circumstances, the detective's eyes narrowed. "And you've been keeping records ever since I noticed the pattern." After a moment of hesitation, I took out another phone from my purse. I began to keep a backup phone with a different number on me as well. I utilized it to capture discussions while I was around them. Though they take care to avoid becoming overt, I have many instances when Nina and James talk about their goals. In one of the recordings, the sound of Nina's voice was unmistakable. "The Henderson account is worth millions, James. We can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few days of sickness ought to be plenty." James. His reaction was as terrible. "This time, I have something more powerful. She won't make it to the presentation." Detective Mendoza's expression darkened as she listened through the window of Nina's room. My sister-in-law was now awake, as I could see. She appeared far less self-assured than she did at breakfast. The detective told me that toxicological testing are being conducted at the hospital. A number of compounds that are not found in nature have previously been identified by Dr. Phillips. "We will also want samples from your residence." We heard a disturbance down the hallway. James was disputing with the security personnel, his voice increasing in frustration. "I have to talk to my wife," he yelled. "Please, Christina, you're not understanding. We were trying to protect you." We were separated by Detective Mendoza. "You're not making your point, Mr. Bennett. We've already found proof of premeditated." "Was it planned?" James laughed, a hollow sound that resonated along the corridor. "We were just trying to slow her down. She was working herself to death, considering all of the important accounts. Nina asked if we might poison her to force her to take a break." The voice of Detective Mendoza was piercing. "That's not protection, Mr. Bennett. That's attempted murder." The color left James's face. "Murder? No, it's not. We didn't intend to." "Then, what exactly did you mean to do?" My voice was unusually calm as I asked, "What was meant to happen when you added something to my coffee this morning?" Behind him, James's quiet spoke more than words could. Through the window of her hospital room, I could see Nina observing. Her expression was one of fear and cunning. I pondered whether she was attempting to twist this. How can I justify months of consistent poisoning as some kind of mistaken attempt to assist me? Detective Mendoza informed the security personnel that we would want both of their phones. "And I want cops positioned at both doors. Nobody leaves until we have the toxicological findings." Dr. Phillips entered Nina's chamber with a tablet in hand, her look bleak as she studied the test findings. James stayed outside with the guards, and I followed Detective Mendoza. In her hospital bed, Nina made an effort to sit up taller, but the tremors hadn't quite stopped. Several drugs had high amounts, according to the toxicological study. Her voice was clinical, according to Dr. Phillips. The presence of a specific chemical that is often utilized in pharmaceutical testing is the most worrying. The general public shouldn't be able to access it. Nina's face became white. "That's impossible." According to James, it was only meant to produce minor symptoms, mild symptoms. Taking out a notebook, similar to the ones your sister-in-law had been using for the previous 6 months, Detective Mendoza interrupted. Another investigator came in with an evidence bag as the door opened. "We found these in Mr. Bennett's office desk at the Anderson marketing firm." According to his report, he displayed a number of little bottles with clinical labeling and thorough notes about doses and reactions. As I became fully aware of their strategy, I felt my knees weaken. "You were recording everything as if it were an experiment." Nina argued that it wasn't like that, but her voice faltered. "All we had to do was monitor what worked." The initial efforts were insufficiently successful. Nevertheless, you continued to attend meetings. Detective Mendoza looked over the bottles and said, "So, you increased the dosages?" Did you know these substances could be lethal in higher concentrations? There was silence in the room. With his head in his hands, James collapsed into a chair in the corridor, still visible through the glass. The Henderson account, I said slowly, parts clicking into place. That presentation wasn't the only thing that happened, was it? You needed me out of the way forever since the customer explicitly requested me as their lead. A mixture of dread and rage twisted Nina's face. You were ruining everything. I created that client portfolio for years, and then you turn up and suddenly everyone wants to work with you instead. James stated he could cure it by murdering me. The accusatory tone of the words lingered in the air. We weren't trying to, Nina started, but Dr. Phillips cut her off. The level of focus in the coffee you had today, the doctor added, staring straight at Nina, was much greater than prior samples we've evaluated from Miss S. Bennett's past hospital visits. Had she ingested it, the consequences would have been dire, maybe lethal. Detective Mendoza looked across to the other cop. Both their residences and workplaces will require a complete warrant. Additionally, get in touch with the drug manufacturer mentioned on these bottles. Learn how they acquired these drugs. With the fight gone from her features, Nina sagged back against her cushions. She mumbled that it shouldn't have gone this far. James insisted that we should give it another go. Despite my hands shaking, I moved closer to her bed and spoke steadily. Every time I felt sick, every meeting I missed, every customer I lost, both of you were observing and noting the effects of your poison on me. Does that make you a certain sort of person? The ensuing hush was deafening. As more officers arrived, I could hear James being read his rights outside. Unable to look me in the eye, Nina gazed at her hands. I turned away from my sister-in-law and replied, "Detective, I'm now prepared to make my official declaration." 3 weeks passed during the trial, but it seemed like years. Every day, I watched as the prosecution methodically presented their case against James and Nina in the courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming. The bottles from James's office, the thorough records they kept on every poisoning attempt, and the text messages and audio calls they used to coordinate their intentions. Their behavior during the proceedings was what most impressed me. Normally so poised and self-assured, Nina appeared diminutive in her defendant's chair. As expert witnesses described the potentially fatal effects of the narcotics they had been consuming, James was unable to even look at me. Instead, he kept his eyes focused on the floor. In particular, Dr. Phillips' evidence was scathing. She presented a comprehensive analysis showing how they had gradually increased the dosages over time, demonstrating clear intent to cause serious harm. The pharmaceutical business representative verified that James had stolen the substances through his college acquaintance, who worked in their research department. In her closing remarks, the prosecutor said that the accused had a deliberate pattern of action. There was more to this than corporate sabotage. An obvious escalation that could have led to Miss S. Bennett's death was part of a systematic attempt to harm her. I was relieved rather than happy when the verdict was eventually read. James and Nina were convicted on several charges, including conspiracy and attempted murder. The courtroom was hushed while the judge spoke. Given the deliberate nature of these acts and the length of time they were committed against a family member, the highest punishment is warranted. As I saw them being taken away in handcuffs, I reflected on how envy and greed had turned two individuals I had once trusted into something completely different from who they were before their freedom, their businesses, their reputations, all in an effort to ruin me. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the stage of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, prepared to make the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nina had attempted to stop me from getting the Henderson account, which she and James had been so desperate to steal. This resulted in a number of other significant clients, making me one of the top marketing executives in the area. Success isn't simply about skill or hard effort. I began staring out at the sea of faces. It's about integrity, about building genuine relationships based on trust. I took a moment to process what I had said. Sometimes the biggest risks to our success come from people closest to us, but surviving those challenges makes us stronger. After my speech, numerous young professionals approached me asking assistance. One woman, her eyes bright with determination, asked how I'd maintained my composure throughout the ordeal. I concentrated on my controllables. I informed her that I gathered information, followed my gut, and didn't allow fear deter me from achieving my objectives. The Henderson customer confirmed to me via email later that night that they were extending their contract for an additional 3 years. I grinned, thinking about how differently things could have turned out if I hadn't heeded my intuition that day at breakfast. That morning, a brief story about Nina and James starting their prison terms appeared in the local newspaper. I didn't read it. Knowing that getting even wasn't the greatest form of retaliation, I instead concentrated on the proposal for my most recent customer assignment. It was about overcoming those who attempted to stop you from excelling and moving on. Story 3. We're heading to the airport with our family. My child's ticket was canceled. My mom laughed too many people. Thus, we abandoned your children. My sister giggled. After all, this is a trip for actual family. My son broke down in tears. Mom, I want to go too. Silently, I grasped his hand and went away. Days later, they came to me in tears, pleading for assistance. My name is Rachel Thompson. I work for Prestige Real Estate, a posh Boston real estate firm, as the director of accounting. Our company's office is located on the 35th story of the Prudential Tower in the Back Bay neighborhood. Through the large windows, we have a panoramic view of the Charles River and Boston Harbor, with visibility stretching far into the distance. On clear days, our office, furnished with top-of-the-line pieces, creates an atmosphere befitting the luxury properties we handle. As you walk off the elevator into our lobby, gentle chandelier light welcomes visitors and fresh flowers are always put at the reception counter. After finishing high school, I began working as an accountant at my mother's firm, while learning on my own to obtain certifications and attending night classes. I now fondly remember those days when I would stay late into the night, studying long after other staff had gone home. Those efforts paid off when I designed an accounting system from scratch that produces yearly cost savings of $1 million, considerably contributing to the company's development. At the same company, my husband, David, is the director of sales, managing deals with large corporations and attaining 70% of total sales. We live as a family of 3 with our kind, family-orientated David and our 8-year-old son, Oliver. Our son is intelligent and trustworthy, and he has a special bond with my mother, his grandmother. He looks forward to visiting her residence on weekends. Every weekend morning, Oliver wakes up early and packs his picture books and toys into his suitcase to head to his grandmother's house. I feel a range of complicated emotions when I watch him do this. In Boston social circles, my mother, Margaret, is well known as the president of Prestige Real Estate. She also serves on the board of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and resides in a magnificent estate in the Brookline district. My sister Jenny. After graduating from Harvard University, she works as the director of public relations and is active on social media. Mother and Jenny are very mindful of their higher class position and occasionally explicitly discriminate against me at corporate gatherings due to my educational background. Mother gives my modest attire an admiring glance from head to toe as she walks past my desk, swishing the hem of her high-end suit. Only yesterday, at a crucial customer meeting, Mother simply considered Jenny's viewpoints and disregarded my suggestion. Jenny is the same way. She commutes in a luxury automobile that is ecologically responsible, wears the newest designer brands, and shares on social media about her organic-based lifestyle. She occasionally makes my plain clothing and practical car the subject of her social media posts. Last week, she wrote a post ridiculing my suit as outdated fashion, eliciting laughs from her fans. Strangely enough, their affection for Oliver never changes. Jenny and Mother both treat Oliver with kindness and purchase pricey clothing and toys for him. Oliver's drawings are displayed in Mother's office, and he frequently appears on Jenny's social media as her beloved nephew. On the surface, our family looks to preserve peaceful ties in the posh Brooklyn neighborhood, where Victorian homes stand in neat rows, while Oliver spends his weekends at Mother's house in one corner of this region. I occasionally think every morning as I go past the old public high school building. I have never once felt remorse for the decision I made. However, I can't help but wonder what are true family bonds. What is the true definition of success, and how long can we keep our relationships this way? To improve our family ties, I have organized a trip to Hawaii. At the conclusion of the company's monthly meeting, Mother's unexpected statement was quickly flung out the window. There was a brilliant light coming from the high-rise windows reflecting the summer sun in Boston. It's Maui's most opulent resort, the Four Seasons Resort Maui at Wailea. I've booked first-class round-trip flights in Ocean View Suite accommodations. Mother projected pictures onto the meeting room screen and used her branded iPad. A beautiful white hotel facing an emerald green ocean, well-maintained tropical plants, an endless horizon extending from the private pool. I have everything Instagram-worthy planned, including a private yacht, a sunset cruise, island tours by helicopter, and a private dinner with a celebrity chef. Jenny nodded eagerly beside Mother, already seemed to be preparing her social media posts. She kept tracing the screen of her smartphone with her fingertips. I was secretly delighted. 8-year-old Oliver has never been on a flight before. Just visualizing my son's eyes gleaming made me grin naturally. Departure is 2 weeks from Saturday, 7 a.m. flying. However, surprisingly, Mother didn't give the reservation details. Neither the airline, nor flight number, nor the hotel confirmation email was supplied. Despite my uneasy feeling, I choose to have faith in my mother. Then came the day of departure. Travelers eager for their summer getaways filled the airport terminal. Despite the early morning hour, Oliver's eyes were beaming with delight as he expressed curiosity about everything in the airport. "Hey, are we going to ride that enormous airplane?" "Fantastic." My youngster went to the window, pointing at the airplanes lined up on the runway full of enthusiasm. David put his hand on our son's shoulder and grinned softly. Mother and Jenny were hauling their newest Louis Vuitton trunks and snapping pictures. "Luxury travel," Jenny kept saying while taking selfies. "Now, let's walk to the check-in counter." Our family followed our mother's lead. The sound of expensive bags gliding over the floor formed a cue as we proceeded, but that apprehension turned into reality and struck us at the check-in desk. "I apologize, but I am unable to locate your reservation." The counter personnel stared at the screen with a perplexed expression. "They can't seem to locate our reservation." "Mom," I said. Her expression abruptly shifted at that point. "There were too many people, so we decided you and your family should sit this one out." Those words plummeted like ice pellets. Jenny chuckled and added, "Yes, this is a trip for the genuine family after all." Oliver's little body started to shake. "I'd want to go too, Mom." "Why? Just us?" The voice of my son was trembling. His innocent eyes started to well up with tears. The gazes of those around us gradually gathered on us. I calmly grasped my son's hand. Anxiety felt moist and chilly in his little hand. David grasped our suitcase again with a respectful stance. "Let's take a family vacation somewhere else, Oliver." I sounded more composed than I had anticipated. Maybe my heart had remained calm because of the anger I felt, which was unlike anything I had ever experienced. In my ear, David whispered, "Actually, I had booked arrangements at Disney World just in case. The trip to Orlando is in an hour. It's at a different terminal, but we can still make it." Gratitude welled up inside me at my husband's comments behind us as we departed. I could hear Mother and Jenny starting to pose for commemorative photos. The sound of camera shutters was absorbed into the hustle and bustle of the check-in counter. I could just hear Jenny's voice saying, "Hey, is this really okay? Everything is all right." That kind of trip isn't suitable for people of their class. The air conditioning wind conveyed the sound of Mother's response like a final goodbye. Still clutching Oliver's hand, we went toward the airport for the Orlando-bound aircraft. My son's tears hadn't completely dried yet, but I could feel his small lips beginning to move slightly toward hope. "Can we actually take a trip together, Mom?" "Indeed. Naturally. Let's take pleasure in our actual family getaway." I could feel Oliver's hand getting a little warmer in the Maui blue sky at that precise moment. Jenny and Mother were engrossed in shooting pictures for Instagram. "Increase your rightward tilt, Aunt Margaret." "Indeed. Excellent. Top private beach. Luxurious way of living." Jenny was giving instructions to a professional photographer on the luxury resort's private beach. Mother, dressed in the latest resort wear, was striking poses on the white sand. "Next, let's shoot a video of the deluxe spa treatment." My glitzy social media postings have my fans waiting behind them. Mother and Jenny were monitoring one another's faces in the eyes of the two, attempting to construct the perfect family vacation. There was something hollow. Meanwhile, at Disney World in Florida, Oliver's eyes were sparkling as he rushed for his favorite characters. We were genuinely happy as we were surrounded by our son's naive smiles. For the only purpose of preserving our son's memories, our camera recorded Oliver's genuine happiness without considering social media posts. "Hey, Oliver, Are you enjoying being here with Mom and Dad? David inquired, holding Oliver on his shoulders in front of Magic Kingdom's Cinderella Castle. Indeed, it's the world's most enjoyable activity. I'm content to be with Mom and Dad, but it would have been lovely to have Grandma and Aunt present as well. My son's remarks brought tears to both David's and mine eyes. David moved up to me that night, after Oliver had gone to sleep, exhausted in the hotel room. You are a really strong woman, Rachel. Our relationship has become even closer as a result of this encounter. Fireworks were illuminating the night sky outside the window. Their light seemed to be blessing our family's new step forward. Then, while we were eating breakfast on the morning of the third day of our trip, my cell phone began to ring. Linda from the company's accounting department called urgently. But it's awful, Rachel. A notice of an urgent tax audit has been sent to us. Also, there's an important situation from Wilson Corporation that needs rapid attention. Linda was shaky as she spoke. 40% of our company's sales come from Wilson Corporation. Relax, Linda. What precisely took place? The new accounting system's functionality is being questioned by the tax office. Additionally, Wilson Corporation wants to speak with David directly about the terms of their new development project contract. The company had fallen into a state of panic. Mother's mobile phone was ringing a lot, but it appeared that she had been ignoring them. When Mother finally realized the situation, she contacted me frantically. This is awful. Return immediately to the firm. Our family and I are currently on a different kind of vacation. I answered quietly but firmly. The business is having problems. Isn't it the system you designed? You must accept accountability. We were left out of the true family by you. I have valuable time with my family right now. Stop being obstinate at a moment like this. If the business fails, don't hold it against me. Mother's shouts resound through the phone in the background. I could hear Jenny terrified saying, "What should I do? I'm losing followers." I silently hung up the phone. Oliver gave us a concerned look as David silently put his hand on my shoulder. "Today, Oliver, it's all right. Let's all head to Animal Kingdom." At those words, my son's demeanor brightened, but in my heart I could feel a tempest developing. Their last notice came from Wilson Corporation. Without David's presence, we feel it hard to proceed with negotiations on this topic. Transactions that are founded on relationships of trust are valued by us. By the minute, things were getting worse. We did, however, have time with family, a more priceless Oliver grin, and a chance to reflect on what real accomplishment actually meant at that moment. From the large windows on the 35th floor of the Prudential Tower, the prestigious real estate office had lost its former glitz. The breathtaking vista of Boston Harbor continues to expand. However, nobody could now afford to take in that vision. At the entryway, the fresh flowers had dried up and stayed like way. Even the chandelier lights seemed dimmer than before. The tax audit's findings were more dire than anticipated. Regarding the specifics of the accounting system I had developed, the auditors persisted in their inquiries. This system's really creative. However, because of it, we require extensive explanations concerning its compliance with conventional accounting rules. An old auditor in the conference room scowled as he went over the papers. A young auditor beside him continued to ask questions. Could you elaborate on the precise methodology used to calculate this cost-cutting mechanism? Mother's expression was one of panic, as she was unable to comprehend the questions. Jenny continued to gaze at her phone, perhaps taken aback by how quickly her social media following was dropping. I think the only person who can explain this is Rachel, who created the system. I'm sorry, Margaret, but we need to think about going over our contract again. The Wilson Corporation executive made the announcement sternly. Our relationship of trust with David served as the foundation for our transactions. But this incident raises concerns about the management practices of your organization. The company lobby echoed icily with those words. Figures of irate workers were present. Mountains of unprocessed paperwork buried the accounting personnel. After another mother, in a state of panic, finally stormed into my house, the sales department was getting one customer complaint. We had just gotten home from Disney World when the doorbell began to ring nonstop. "Rachel, we need your aid, David." Behind her, Mother's high-end suit was wrinkled and her makeup was smudged. Jenny was weeping. "The corporation will go bankrupt. You must return," I responded quietly. "Kindly work it out with your actual family. Such intransigence is not appropriate at this moment." Mother's voice was trembling. "This isn't being obstinate. The dignity of our family is at stake here." Just then, David came out of the study carrying papers. Actually, I've been preparing for a possible situation like this for the past few years. Plans for starting a new business, Thompson Family Real Estate, were laid out in the documents he supplied. My clientele, Rachel's system, and above all, our familial ties, were prepared to move forward. The color faded from Mother and Jenny's faces. "You're becoming self-sufficient." To those words, I nodded firmly. Industry-wide rumors of the new company's formation immediately proliferated. Then came a flood of surprising answers. "We would be delighted to collaborate with you if it's David and Rachel's new business. Honest demeanor and precise bookkeeping. That's exactly what we've been looking for. Having creative systems while preserving the virtues of family management. It's perfect." Wilson Corporation also gave us some good news. "We will definitely think about working with your new business. Rachel's correct accounting processing and David's genuine attitude. We have faith in you because of this." Mother's firm, however, quickly lost its centripetal drive. They had to give up several floors in order to save money because the upkeep of the opulent office became an enormous burden. They were obliged to shift from the higher stories to more economical middle floors. Notices of contract termination continued to pile up on Mother's desk. Jenny's social media account didn't appear to be getting over the criticism. Her following, which had topped 1 million, had suddenly shrunk to fewer than 1/10. How did this happen? Mother's eyes were vacant as she gazed out the window. Her expensive clothing didn't seem quite right. What was our pride about, Rachel? There was a vulnerability and hesitation in their statements that had never been witnessed before. I experienced a range of complicated emotions as I saw my mother's figure start to reveal her actual self as her pride faded. Our new office, meanwhile, was located in the Back Bay neighborhood of Boston in a quite unassuming structure, but it was definitely heated there. "Rachel, good morning. Today's pictures of your son are very adorable." At the reception, flowers with happy faces are constantly exhibited. Oliver would visit on the weekends and engage in cheerful conversation with the staff. The explanation session for the new system was very easy to understand. Thanks to David, we landed a major deal. The employees' voices were filled with pride and joy. At dark, I was staring down at the city from our new office window. Nevertheless, it is not as tall as the Prudential Tower. I could see our family's new future in this view. David gave me a back hug. "Rachel, our decision wasn't incorrect." I nodded deeply at those words, though. Mother-related complex sentiments persisted. We felt a real sense of achievement now. Christmas lights were beginning to illuminate the streets of Boston. From our new house's window, Oliver adores illuminations. Glow in the garden. Decorating the Christmas tree together has been our family ritual. Thompson Family Real Estate has acquired a firm position in the sector within a year of its start. Many of our clients found resonance in our sincere and innovative concept, and word-of-mouth marketing helped us build our name. Rachel. The new technology has significantly increased our productivity. The accounting team is beaming as they report. On weekends, David's sales department was also gradually accumulating accomplishments. Oliver is excited to see the business. Oliver always gets homemade cookies from Jane at reception. "What sort of work are you doing today, Mom?" My son sits in my chair and looks at the computer screen with a serious expression. He gets soft smiles from the staff. The lives of Mother and Jenny, meantime, had undergone a significant transformation. Prestige Real Estate was compelled to reduce its operations to a smaller real estate firm. Mother wanted to relocate from her luxurious apartment to a more cheap one. Jenny hardly ever updated her social media accounts anymore. But this shift seems to bring about some surprising insights. One day, a handwritten note came at my workplace. It was from Mother. "Dear Rachel, I've thought about many things during this last year. I want to express my heartfelt regret for my haughty demeanor at the airport that day. I lost sight of what really important because I was ensnared in the delusion of higher class. I nearly lost the most valuable thing I had, family ties, because I was preoccupied with social media likes and flimsy success. As a mother and a grandma, seeing Oliver develop from a distance has helped me understand what was really required. I'm not pleading for pardon. I just wonder if we could have another chance to face each other as family with love. Mom." As I finished reading the letter, tears filled my eyes. Then Christmas Eve arrived. We decided to have a modest celebration in our new house. We entertained our staff members and their families with home-cooked meals. When the doorbell rang and I opened the front door, there stood Mother and Jenny. They weren't dressed in their typical ostentatious attire. They had a handmade apple pie in their hands. "We appreciate the invitation." There was a tenderness in Mother's voice that I had never heard before. Jenny also had a genuine face and wore very little makeup. I sincerely regret my haughtiness at the time. We at last recognized the value of family. At what they said, the group became quiet. At that moment, Oliver rushed up. "Grandma." "Aunt Jenny." The lovely little grin began to warm the chilly atmosphere. I took a big breath and picked my words carefully. "It will take time to forgive, but let's try to gradually mend our friendship for Oliver's benefit as well." Mother's eyes glistened with tears. Jenny gave a small nod. "Grandma, next time, let's go on a true family trip with everyone." Oliver's simple proposal made the room's atmosphere soften beyond the window. The snow had started to fall softly. Our family was softly lit by the Christmas tree lights. David offered a toast to the new family ties by opening a bottle of champagne. The sound of clinking glasses resonated across the room. Mother and Jenny's looks no longer betrayed their prior arrogance, replaced instead with humility and kindness. In this past year, we lost many things and gained new ones. Each family member learnt what actual happiness is, rather than superficial achievement. As Oliver unwrapped gifts beneath the Christmas tree, his enthusiastic voice can be heard. Outside the glass, I could see the outline of our new family as I watched Mother tenderly massage her grandson's head. The lights bounced off the snow that was falling, gleaming like hopeful lights. What does success really mean? Family bonds, what are they? The solution was shockingly straightforward. Just hearts that care for one another, and the guts to own up to mistakes and forgive one another without any ostentation or pretense. I think this is the path we chose, and the path we will continue to walk as I stand calmly at the window and look out at the white landscape. The glow of optimism permeated the metropolis as the new year was ready to begin.